class earlier in the day. All right, I apologize. You're going to get to hear the entire lecture about the syllabus and stuff all over again. And that's incredibly boring, I know. But I don't know how to fix that. So, what are we going to do today? We're going to cover the syllabus. We're going to cover the way that the class works. And we're going to write just a really short little program so that we will have touched our fingertips to C++ and submitted it to the Dropbox so that we know how to do all of those steps. So you should be able to get to our D2l page. We are using D2l and not Canvas for this particular class. It'll be the last semester that D2l is even around. You're going to want to go to class information. You should be able to find a document called syllabus. And whenever you view things in D2l and you see this little preview window, that's great and all, but sometimes it doesn't display exactly what you want it to do. It may be poorly formatted, or there may be information missing. That's particularly true of PowerPoints. I would not use that preview window to load a PowerPoint, so I tend to always download the document and then open it from the desktop, which I will do here as well. All right, so C++. C++ programming, that's what we're going to be learning. What is C++? It's a programming language. It's a direct descendant of one of the very first, well, I won't say the very first. The C programming language was invented in like 1970. And it was invented by Bell Labs, AT&T, in order to power their telephone switching equipment. And then it was incorporated as part of the Unix operating system, and the Unix operating system wound up being incredibly popular. And so everywhere the Unix machines went, so was the C++ language, C, which was used to program them. And so it became incredibly popular. It's still used a lot, but then C++ was layered on top of it to make it object-oriented. And we'll talk about the difference between those two. And then that is an incredibly common programming language. Probably most of the games that you play, like on the PlayStation or Xbox or whatever, are written in some variant of C++. So what are we going to be doing? We're going to learn how to use the C++ programming language using different programming development tools and techniques. Core concepts of writing computer programs: variables, decisions, loops, functions, classes, and object-oriented programming. We will also be learning the Microsoft Visual Studio development environment. That's if you're using it on the PC. You're free to bring your Mac in, your laptop. And if you're going to do that, you're going to wind up installing something called Xcode, which is the Macintosh C++ development toolkit. And it's not just for C++, it supports a million other different languages too, as does Visual Studio. That's totally cool if you want to do that. In which case you would be working, even if you're not using a Mac, feel free to bring your laptop, right? And then develop using your laptop rather than these desktop computers. That's totally cool. Alrighty, so that's the class. Where are we meeting? We're meeting right here. I'm Professor Jeff Thompson. You can call me Professor Thompson. You can call me Jeff. I don't care what you call me as long as it's not rude. Here is my phone number. I would greatly appreciate it. And even for those of y'all who just did this in the very last class, please grab your phone and send me a text message to that phone number, if you would be so kind. So, send a text message to that phone number and put in it your name and CIT1173, just so I know which class you're in. And that way you have me programmed into your phone so that when you need me, you can call me or send me a text message. That'll be more useful than you think when you get stuck on a programming problem. You ask me about it, I'll ask you just to send me a picture of your code. So you put your code up on screen, you take a picture of it, you send it to me, and quite often I can identify it within seconds. I can just say, oh look, on line 87 you need to do this, this, this. Hi. Then you can also let me know if you're not going to be there for the day or whatever, and I can also let you know, right? If I know that the class is going to be canceled that day because of weather, y'all are probably all subscribed to the alert system that tells you things like that, but I'll send a message out as well. I'll say, don't come into class. It's iced over. Or if I'm sick and I'm not going to be able to make it, hopefully that won't happen. But you know, if it did, I would post a message on D2l, I would mail, and then I would also send a text message out for every phone number I have. I will never use these phone numbers for any other purpose other than talking about this particular class, and at the end of the semester I delete them all. Excuse me. So delivery method, hybrid, lecture, and online. The online component of it is that we upload all of our assignments, and you'll be uploading your answers and stuff like that and taking the exams all through the computer on the network. Also, the lectures are videotaped. Well, not videotaped with a video camera, but the lectures are recorded so that you get to see what's on the screen and you hear my voice. So if you miss a day, all you have to do is to watch that lecture, right? And then listen to what I'm saying, and then if you want to follow along and type in the program that we're typing in that day, then please do so. We'll get into more into that later. The textbook. If you've already bought it, great. If you haven't, buy it soon. Do you have to use the 9th edition? Could you get away with using the 8th edition and saving 30 or 40 bucks? Yeah, you probably could. I wouldn't complain. So anyways, you're going to want to get the textbook. You're going to also want a home computer capable of doing C++ development on it. If you're not going to be able to install C++ on a machine at home, then there are a couple of things you can do. One is you could come to campus and use the computers in the business lab, which is just right across the hallway. That would work. Another is you might be able to find an online C++ development tool, but that would be a really poor second choice. And what do I mean by that? If I come in, I type in online C++, it might take me to a web page where I can edit C++ code. Maybe. And there we go, right? It looks like a code editor. So we could conceivably do our work right here. But then when you were going to submit it, you'd have to copy it and paste it into a document and upload it. Anyways, I'm hoping everybody has access to a computer. What are we going to be doing? Recognize and identify the basic vocabulary and concepts of C++. There's some garbled language here. By identifying, I think that just should say by writing. That sentence needs improvement. Anyways, the basic structure and parts of a C++ language computer program. Demonstrate a working knowledge of C++ by writing, compiling, debugging, and executing various simple C++ language computer programs. It seems like we use this phrase over and over. It almost looks boilerplate. And demonstrate a working knowledge of object-oriented design by developing business-oriented programs using the class data type in C++. So we will learn what object-oriented programming is and what a class is and what objects are and stuff like that. But that's more like second half of the class. At first, we're going to treat C++ as though it were an old-fashioned procedural language like people were using in the 70s, and that's fine because that's what you do in pretty much every programming class. Even if it is an object-oriented programming class, you learn to use it in its simplest format, and then it snowballs into something bigger and bigger and bigger. So, like I said, there are computers next door. There are also computers at the LRC, but I can't guarantee that they have Visual Studio installed on them. In fact, my doubt is that they do not. But we can find out on that. If you're going to do the development, if you're going to do your homework, you will have to have some kind of C++ editor compiler on your machine. I recommend Visual Studio just because that's what we're using at school, and it'll look exactly like what you're using at school, except the version you install at home will probably be newer since a lot of these machines are still running Windows 7. Is that true? Are you all on Windows 10 now? Okay. Well, that's cool. So this room's been upgraded to Windows 10, which means that the Visual Studio is probably a newer version as well. But that's not the only C++ development environment out there. You could use one called Eclipse. All you have to do is look up, if you have a reason for not wanting to use the Visual Studio one, you could find other ones. C++ Windows environment, right? And see what it comes up with. Eclipse is a good one. If If you have a Mac, then you're going to want to download Xcode. If you're running Linux, you probably already have access to all this stuff and know how to pull it out, from the repositories or whatever. So, simplest thing to talk about, though, is Visual Studio, since that's what we're going to be using here. But feel free to use whatever you want, but just make sure that you get it done, that you can do it. And so that's what the first homework assignment is going to be, which is just to install a C++ development environment, take a screenshot, and submit that to show that you have it working on your computer. So email, all students have an email account. I bet y'all already know this, but you can get to it at mail.rader.rose.edu, or what do you really do? You just type in Gmail, right? Go to Gmail, it's your first name dash last name at rader.rose.edu, some permutation of that, and I'm sure that you already know all that information. I'm not trusting that these are the correct dates. Maybe they are. I'm going to delete that section because it's repeated later on, and I'm sure. No, that looks like it's for a summer course. Yeah, we're deleting that section. So the grading scale is pretty boring. 60% a D, 70's a C, 80's a B, 90's an A. Students always ask if the course is curved. No, it's not really curved, but the reason for that is I tend to get out a lot of people make A's in the course, right? It's not designed as a killer course that's supposed to wipe you out. Only one person makes A's and 3 people are going to make B's and 20 people are going to make D's or whatever. No, I like to see it start off heavy with a lot of A's and then just go down there. But if you wind up making like an 89.5, I'm certainly going to probably round it up to a 90 because I don't want to be a jerk. I'm happy to give out lots of good grades, but that does mean that you have to do the work, right? You don't get it for free, but I try to make it possible for you to get a good grade. Grades are broken down to where a third of it is based on the programs you write at home, a third of it is based on what we do here in class, and then a third of it is over the quizzes and the exams. We'll probably have 3 exams, 2 midterms and a final, and then the quizzes will be 1 per chapter. Sounds scary? Nah, the quizzes you can take over and over and over until you get the grade that you want, right? You take it the first time, you make a 75%, you go, okay. You go and you look which answers you got wrong, you take it again. I made an 85. Well, I want 100, so you take it a third time. Great. Why do I let you do that? Because I don't treat the quizzes as a measurement tool, but as a learning opportunity, right? And if you take it a second time and a third time to get it right, you're going to know the material, rather than if you just took it and went, oh, I made a 75, oh well, right? And then the exams are drawn partially. Some of the questions are just word for word written off those chapter quizzes. So, by the time you burn 100 on the quizzes or 90 or whatever, you've taken them enough times to do that. Hopefully it won't take you like more, 2 or 3 tries to get there. Then you'll be ready to walk in for the exams. Now the exams are open book, so that's pretty cool. If you have the book in electronic format, like a Kindle, whatever, just bring your Kindle in, or bring your tablet in. So you're allowed to do that. You're allowed to access your PowerPoint. You're allowed to access your notes. I'll make a folder for you to upload stuff into, so that if you want to put programs you've written, have them easily accessible to you during the quiz, you can do that. I'm expecting you all to take the exams here in class, but if you have to miss that day, you can take it at the Learning Resource Center at the testing center. The only problem there is that you don't have Visual Studio. And if you're one of the types who likes to have Visual Studio so you can type stuff into it while you're taking the exam, then you won't be able to do that. Might not be too much of a hindrance, though, because if you rely too much on typing in the Visual Studio while you're trying to take the exam, then that's actually going to slow you down. Hopefully you won't need to rely on it. But it's nice to be able to use it. You can't use it at the Learning Resource Center. So when you're ready to prove to me that your program works, what are you going to do? You've written your homework, you take a picture of it running. You take a screenshot of it running. And then you upload both the screenshot and the program itself. And by the program itself, I mean the source code for it. And there's a couple different things you can do. One is you can just get me the CPP file for the program itself, or you could zip up the whole folder. And we'll talk about each one of those ways in a minute. So I'm going to want you to give me a screenshot, and I'm going to want you to give me the original source code. The screenshot shows that you actually have it working. Because the problem is that if you give a program to me that doesn't work, meaning it's got a syntax error in it and it won't compile, then the program can't be run. And so I can't do anything except kind of scroll up and down and look at the code, right? So you're not going to get a good grade if you turn in something that doesn't work. We'll talk about that in a little bit. So the grading policy. Program assignments have to be able to run in order to get any credit, even if it doesn't run correctly, right? It has to at least run. And I'll show you what kind of syntax error could stop, your program from even compiling. In this particular language, it's different from Python where you just clicked a button and it would run. This language, you have to quote compile it, which turns it into an executable, and then that is what's run. And if there are syntax errors in the code, then it cannot be turned into an executable. It cannot make an exe file out of it, or an app file if you're, a Linux user or app, or or Mac user, whatever they're called in those terminologies. So you do need to turn in a working program, right? If you don't, if it doesn't work and you upload it, then you'll get a very bad grade on it. You'll get 1 out of 100. Oh man, well I ought to just quit the class, huh? No. What I'll do is I'll say your program doesn't work. You'll see your feedback. I only got 1 out of 100. I only got 80 out of 100 or whatever. And in there I'll say what's wrong, and I'll ask you to revise it and resubmit it. Because I think that you ought to have the chance to do that. In the real world, if you don't get something right the first time, what do? You turn around and you revise it and you redo it. So that's going to be the way that it works in this class as well. If you didn't get a good grade on it, if you didn't make an A on the homework, then I will probably tell you that you're free to revise and resubmit. And you absolutely would want to, right? If you only got 1 out of 100, it'd be, really bad for your grade to just blow those off. Don't blow off your programs. Make sure that they work. I will help you with them. I do want you to give me the screenshots, so you'll only get partial credit at best if you don't give me a screenshot. If you cannot get your program to meet the requirements, but the syntax errors are all fixed, go ahead and submit it. And when you're doing so, you get a chance to type in a comment, right? You're in D2l, you choose the file, and before you click the submit button, there's a comment field. You just say, I couldn't make the program calculate the blah, blah, blah correctly. Don't leave it to me to figure out what doesn't work. Don't hope that I won't notice what's not working. Be honest and tell me right there. I'll respect you a lot more, and I'll probably give you a better grade on it than if I have to go in there and find out that the blah, blah, blah didn't work. But for whatever reason, then you're not going to get a perfect grade on it because all the functionality was not implemented, right? But you'll get a partial credit for it, and then you'll be, I'll give you the chance to revise it and to resubmit it for more credit. So partial credit may be awarded for assignments that do not meet full criteria. If you only receive partial credit, you can revise and resubmit it. I will always say so. Programming assignments are generally due 1 week from the day that they are assigned, meaning that if I give y'all homework today, which I'm gonna, then you're gonna need to have it ready by next Tuesday. Specifically, you're gonna need to have it done Monday at 11:59 Monday. But am I gonna count off because you turned it in Tuesday morning rather than Monday? Nah, you'll still get full credit for it. But just don't let it slide because there is a deduction for late homework. But I will give you that day, right? So, the student must complete at least 50% of the programming assignments. I had somebody who, I don't know what their theme was, because they would come in and they would ace the exams, get 100% on all the exams, and then they didn't do anything else. And if I averaged up all the grades, they would have barely made a 70% based on the quizzes and doing the in-class assignments for the few days that they did come in. But I couldn't pass them because they didn't do a single page of homework. And it is a programming class. We're actually learning how to program, and we're not just learning how to, read a PowerPoint and answer quiz questions. So you generally have a week. You need to get 50% of the programming assignment done. If it's close, right, if it's getting toward the ends of the semester and you're way behind on your programs, then we really need to talk about how you can catch up, because I don't want to get bad grades. We don't give out incompletes anymore, so if you wind up missing like the last third of the semester or the last quarter of the semester, what had happened is you'd make a D or whatever, but then you'd work with your instructor. I'd say, okay, finish the class in the next 4 weeks after the semester ends, and then we'll raise your grade. Get a B or an A or whatever. And I've had people do that. So late assignment policies. If it's up to 7 days late, it's a 10% off, so you can make a 90, right? If it's 2 weeks late, it's another 10%. If it's 3 weeks late, it's another 10%. But beyond 4 weeks late, beyond being a month late, 4 weeks late, it's not going to be accepted for any credit. You can turn it in anyways. But, and really, you should not be waiting that long anyways, right? This makes it look like you could wait 14 days to upload it and still make an 80% on your homework. 80% is pretty good. That's a B. I'm rocking it. But what happened is, you've been to 4 class periods where you didn't have that information tucked in your brain that you should have tucked away in your brain compared to those who did finish the program on time. And so for 4 lecture periods, that information isn't there to be built upon, right? So really try to keep up with the due dates. I ought to be more hard-nosed about the deductions, right? I ought to say 25% per week, or 10% per day, or something harsh like that. I'm not going to change the plan, but just know that you don't have to go into an utter and stone cold panic because you're a day or two late on it, but you do want to keep up. If you find yourself getting behind, and you're behind on this assignment, and you're behind on that assignment, then you're getting in trouble, because if you don't complete these things, you're not going to be able to do the next one and the next one. It all builds upon each other. It's like you're trying to learn how to play soccer, but you don't know how to run. It's going to be real hard to play soccer if you don't know how to run down the field. Now, the in-class assignments, they don't have kind of that graduated 90% or 10% per week penalty, but if you don't get them turned in within the month of the lecture, then you're not going to get any credit. Like, again, a month is way too generous. I ought to make it a week, right? If you miss a day, then watch the video over the weekend. That's generally the mindset that I would expect y'all to do, is if you miss a lecture, don't sweat it. It's not a big deal. Just watch the video and go ahead and upload what is requested. Penalties for late assignments might be waived, right? You tell me that you had to go to Wisconsin to, attend your aunt's funeral, or, you're pregnant and you're going to be, obviously there's going to be a big chunk of time in there where you're not going to be doing homework. I get that. So, talk to me about it, and I'll tell you, okay, just put in your comments field that we talked about it. So when you submit it, say, this is late. I told you I was going to Wisconsin for blah, blah, blah. And I'll go, okay, yeah, cool. And won't get a deduction for it. But you do need to remind me in the comments field. Even if you told me about it in advance, it's good for me to see that name and that message and be able to tie it all together in my head. Otherwise, you'll have to, correct me on it. So quizzes need to be submitted by the due date, but once they are graded, you can redo the quiz to try to get a higher score. I've already mentioned that. So attendance. I do take attendance. That doesn't mean that you get points off for not showing up. But as a general rule, the students who attend classes do better in the course. And here's another general rule. What happens is that somebody will miss a day, and then they'll watch the video. And they'll think, hey, that's pretty cool. I didn't want to go outside. It was 20 degrees anyways. And so the next time class comes along and you feel the inclination not to go, you won't go. And you'll watch the video. And you'll do it again, and you won't watch the video. You'll put it off. And you'll miss another class period, and you won't watch the video. And then things start spiraling really fast. So if at all possible, do attend class. If you can't attend class, do watch the videos over the weekend or something like that according to your work schedule. But if there's a reason not to be here, don't come in. If you're sick, don't come in. I totally understand. If the weather's bad, even if campus is closed, if you don't like driving on the roads the way they look, don't come in. I'll be happy to come in and see an empty room if it looks icy, but the campus was stupid enough not to close. So, whatever. Just take care of yourself and let me know, that you're not coming in. That's a nice consideration. But if you do miss a lecture, then just keep up as soon as possible. AW means, absentee withdrawal. You were gone the first 2 weeks of class. You never attended, you never did any work. In that case, AW will be recorded on your transcript. Obviously, none of y'all fit into that category. So if that happened, then if anybody had given you a grant to go to school and they were paying your tuition, they would come and they would take the money back out of your pocket for not showing up at class. Do know that you always need to attend the first week of a class in general. If it's an 8-week class, you get 1 week. If it's a 16-week, you get 2 weeks. I've had people contact me 3 or 4 weeks into the semester wondering why they could no longer, they couldn't get into the web server, and they had an AW on their transcript. And I said, did you read the syllabus? No. Did you watch any of the videos? No. Did you do any of the work? No. But I didn't know attendance was mandatory. You haven't even started until today. I can't reverse the AW. So anyways, student expectations. I want you to have access to the internet and to C++ development tools. You will install something so that you can write C++ code. Please check D2l regularly and your email. Put my name in the important contacts, the VIP. I'm kidding. Do that. Attend class. Please watch the videos for missed lectures. Use the textbook. You paid good money for it. You may as well use it. Keep up with the schedule and the due dates. Complete assignments on time. That sounds like a restating of that one. Do communicate with the professor about problems of the class and ask for help when needed. I'm really glad to help y'all. I've even set up time periods where I would give let people come in and we would give a special lecture over a complicated topic, right, that people were missing out on. And I've done that for like just 2 people who wanted to lecture. You know, or you can come into my office and we'll sit there and we'll look at it together. Or like I said, doing the text messaging works great. So please feel free to bring your laptop. If you have a tablet or phone or whatever, set it on silent, right? And if you're going to be sending somebody a whole bunch of messages during class, you're sitting there typing away and stuff like that. Don't only set it on silent, but take the vibrator function off. Because if it sits on your desk and it's going you know, over every 45 seconds because somebody's sending messages to you, the people around you get really annoyed, and eventually somebody complains to me. Just don't do things that are distracting. Don't put anything on your screen that's distracting. Don't watch videos, Twitch streams, play video games, you know, League of Legends or whatever. There's all sorts of ways you could find to, you know, to pleasurably pass the time. But don't, you know, don't put anything on your screen that's more interesting than I am. If I modify the syllabus, you will certainly know about it. I will talk about it in class. Notification will be posted on D2l, and I'll send out email. But why would I modify the syllabus? I've never saw the need to do that. But if I did, then you would get notice of it. And at that point, after you've gotten the email and seen a D2l post about it and heard me lecture about it, it's up to you to understand that there's been a change. I will grade homework within a week of submission, and if there are errors in it, you won't receive full credit, but you can correct and revise it to earn more. Missed due dates do result in deductions. If you send me email, I try to get back to you within a day. If it's over the weekend, well, maybe I might miss the day, right? If you text me, I usually get back to you very, very quickly. That's the fastest way to get a hold of me. If you send me email and I haven't answered it yet, feel free to text me and say, I sent you an email, could you look at it? I go, oh, okay, yeah, I'll do so. Now, if you're stuck, I won't write your programs for you, but I will look at what you've written and offer suggestions and explanations. And office hours are offered for face-to-face consultations. I'm here Monday through Thursday. A few people are here on Friday, and that includes me, but I'll come in on Friday if that's your only date that you were able to meet. We just set up an appointment. So expectations of your instructor. What may you expect of me? Provide clear instructions for the assignments. If you look at the assignment and you can't make heads or tails out of it, it's likely that I did something dumb and I wrote the instructions poorly. And likely, if you have a question over it, there are 3 other people in the class who also have questions over it and who haven't asked me. Or it could be that everybody can't understand it. Don't just go, well, I'll take a stab at it. Yeah, I'll do something. Now, I've made really dumb mistakes in the assignments and not had anybody tell me. And I felt like an idiot, when I finally figured out that I didn't tell people what they were supposed to be doing. But I also was, annoyed that they didn't ask me for it. And so people were all struggling separately trying to figure it out, when if just one person would have asked me, I would have provided the corrections. If something is confusing, I'll post an update. That reminds me of something about taking exams. I hope I remember to loop back to it. I will answer questions regarding the assignments. If you pose them in person, email, phone, or text. If it looks like a question that a lot of people might have, then I will post about it on D2l so more people can know about it than just you. I will grade assignments and give feedback. If you make 100%, I'm not going to type a lengthy exposition about it, right? I'll just say, great job, or something like that. But if you don't get 100%, then there's going to be an explanation of why. I will always give you at least a week's notice, usually a week's notice of due assignments and 2 weeks' notice of exams. And I expect there to be 2 midterms and 1 final. We will have dates for those as we come up. I'll nail them down pretty quickly because people sometimes like to make sure that they won't be at work on that day. But like I said, if you do have to miss an exam, you can take it at the library. And I will post all assignments, notices, PowerPoints, and reading assignments on D2l. Everything will be done through D2l. So academic integrity. We could rewrite that. We could rephrase it. Don't chat. No, that's not what I want to say. All right. There we go. All right, now we're good. We'll just scroll. All right. But what does that mean, really? What gets people in trouble the most is that if they get stuck on a programming project, they'll do one of two things. One is they'll ask somebody for help, and then they'll look at that code, but instead of looking at it and figuring out what they need to change on theirs, they'll turn that person's code in. That's problem number one. And the other is if they Google and they find something that looks close, they'll just copy that entire program and submit it. Both of those are really bad. It's worse, though, to copy from somebody else, because then when I figured out that that's happened, that person you copied from is also going to get a 0, and they're going to be pretty unhappy at you. So, in general, if somebody asks you for help, do not give them your code. You can look at their screen and give them some hints, right? You know, that's all you can do. Don't send somebody your source code, because they're very likely just to submit it as though it was their own. And, you know, it's not like you can't ask somebody else to look at your screen. Also, don't get, you know, your spouse who's a professional programming a tinker to write it for you, you know, or your kid or your parent or whatever. But Googling up, and, you know, if I gave you a project and I said, I want you to write a Hangman program, well, 8 billion people on the planet, well, that's a slight exaggeration, have written Hangman programs in C++, and you go and you can find one of those and you can submit it. And I would tell within, you know, half a second of looking at it that it wasn't your code. It would look completely different than the stuff we had learned how to write. And then you would receive a 0 on it, and then other worse things would happen past that point. So in general, it's like writing a term paper, right? If you're writing a paper and you find and you need to access a reference source in order to learn something, all programmers use Google, right? You know, if I want to find out how to learn how to use a vector C++ example, you know, and there are all sorts of sites. As you start looking up stuff on Google, you'll find that there's a vast majority of people who use a place called Stack Overflow. You know, and people post questions and they get answers there, and that's a great way to learn. And you can go and you can look and you can find snippets of code. What you got to do is make sure that you understand it and that you could rewrite it, even if I, you know, handed you a piece of paper with a pencil and I said, okay, now I want you to rewrite as much of your program as you can from memory. Yeah, and you ought to know enough from having looked at it, because you didn't copy and paste it. Instead, you learned it and you made your own program. That's all that you got to do. Is you can find examples of code out on the network, on the internet. But you can't just copy and paste them and submit it as though it were your own work. Just like you can't take, you know, photocopies of pages of stuff and stick them in your term paper, right? You have to give credit if you were going to do that. Instead, you want to make it your own knowledge. The other things you could do, what could you do? There are probably websites out there that have, you know, old copies of people's homework from prior semesters or stuff. I haven't gone in recently to see what's available out there for my stuff, but don't do that. Don't go and find, you know, old assignments. I do change assignments regularly anyways to try to prevent that, but you don't learn anything by turning in anything else. If you work at this class and you put some effort into it, you're probably going to make an A. If the material is really, 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 really difficult for you, then I will, you know, I'll work my butt off to help you understand it. So there's really no excuse for trying to do something like that, trying to, you know, download, you know, libraries of work off the net. The consequences, you will at the least get an F on it. Now, I've been talking about assignments, but you could also cheat during an exam, right? You know, your professor's pretty lax. He lets you use, you know, PowerPoints and stuff like that, where you might open a little browser window and start a chat, you know, with somebody else in the class. You might be trading answers back and forth, or you might be asking questions, you know, of somebody else outside of the class. And I've had people do that. And when I notice it's happening, I have to give them a bad grade. And I hate to be in the position of being Mr. Snooty and bothering them and checking the screens and stuff like that. So, to a good degree, I trust y'all. Just don't abuse that trust, please. Free personal counseling, emotional difficulties, personal skills, overcoming the effects of trauma or grief, you know, you're in a bad relationship and things are just really hard, decreased substance abuse, anything like that, you can go and you can talk to the counselors. They're free, and better yet, they're pretty good. So it's worth going and talking to them. Americans with disabilities, if you have problems, I won't even say problems, that's probably, you know, biased terminology. If you have needs that would require you, in order to do better in your class, to have me make some accommodations for you, I'll be glad to do so, whatever they are. You know, if you need additional time on the exams, fine. If you need to sit on the front 2 rows or be able to use a video camera or a recording device or something, totally cool. All you do is you go and talk to these people at Student Access Services, who used to be the Office of Disability Services, and they'll help you fill out a worksheet. You know, and I've had people with dyslexia who found it very difficult to read the tests, and so they had to, you know, have more time to take them, or, you know, people who had a, you know, physical ailment that left it very difficult for them to type, and so, you know, they were given additional time if they had a writing task. Whatever, I'm happy to help you. The Student Success Center. You can just click on this little link and you can see what they're all about. They have workshops here, scholarships, unlocking your potential to learn, math anxiety, resumes, job searches, how to succeed in science courses, stuff like that. Budgeting within your means. You know, I need that one. So anyways, you can go and you can look at that stuff. Since the stuff is being offered to you, you may as well take advantage of it. All right, we do have a bookstore, as you know. I never remember the URL, so I just go to Google and I type in rose.edu bookstore and it takes me there. Yeah. So here's another phone number you might want to plug into your phone. That's CIT Help Desk. So if you can't access, you know, you can't get online, can't get onto the campus network, then you could call them, ask them for help. They might tell you, well, yeah, you know, we had a meteor strike the building, where you can't, no network today, or whatever. If you're having D2l troubles, then there's a different place to go. There's the D2l Help Desk. If you go there, well, that doesn't look right. Submit a ticket. Yeah, maybe this is it. Anyways, the instructors use this same page. You can't log into D2l, you go to that page, you click login, you fill in your name and your phone number and your Rose ID, and then they'll call you and they'll get you up and running really quick. Like I said, the instructors do this too, and they are amazingly fast. You know, I've had answers like back within 5 minutes of, you know, sending a request in. Sorry about that. I have these little tracking devices, you know, on my keys and wallets and stuff like that. But if you sit on them, then it'll ring your phone. Not really intentional for me to do that. Okay, so we are about done talking about the syllabus. And if you can get on D2l, then you probably don't need the page about how to get D2l help, right? So you just might want to access the D2l webpage and put a bookmark or something like that so that you can get back to it later. You can wander, you know, through the rose.edu web pages until you find it. Or you can visit it in advance and have it bookmarked so that it's available to you when you need it. Alrighty, so if you're going to drop, and hopefully you won't, if you do so by Feb 4, you can get your full refund. Otherwise, you know, the drop dead date is April 22. We have a spring break coming up. Final exams is that week, 13th to the 16th. Ours in particular is on Tuesday. And on the page after that, is that true? Is the schedule for everybody's classes. So that, you know, unless your instructor says otherwise, you can be pretty sure that if your class meets Monday and Wednesday at 8:30 p.m. that the final is going to be on, you know, this particular day at this particular time. So since we're Tuesday, Thursday class that meets at 7:05, then we have our final on May 14th, as said here. All right, the next thing we're going to do is to actually create a C++ program, but are there any questions over what I've talked about? Yes? I'm sorry? The exams are mostly multiple choice and true false. There'll be a couple of places where you're supposed to write a couple of lines of code, right? You know, what? Write me a line of code that would display your name on the screen, right? And so you would type that in. So multiple choice, matching, true false, and a couple of that kind of thing. write a couple lines of code. Pardon me?
Are the quizzes as well? Like that?
I'm so sorry, I'm hard to hear.
Are the quizzes as well like that?
The quizzes are like that. Let's open up one of the quizzes and you can get an idea of what they look like. Yes, because the quizzes are training for the exams, they're very similar. We're going to wind up skipping Chapter 1 pretty much, so that's why the first quiz is over Chapter 2. We may lecture a little bit from Chapter 1, but we're not going to spend much time on it. Chapter 1 in a lot of textbooks about programming languages is this is a computer. This is a mouse. This is a keyboard. These are called input devices, right? That kind of stuff, which is worth reading but not worth lecturing about for several weeks in a row. Alrighty, so I went into the Chapter 2 quiz. And I'm not going to take it, but we're just going to look at it. Question 2. Assuming you have the following declaration. Char C. I don't know what that means. Write an assignment statement that does the following. Stores the character K into C. Well, the answer to that would be C is equal to single quote K. Not L. Alright, like that. How could you get that wrong? Well, you could put double quotes around it rather than single quotes. You know, or you could say K is equal to C. There's all, infinite number of ways of getting things wrong. But anyways, I asked you to write a little line of code, and you could see that the answer was just 6 characters long. And by the time you take this exam, this quiz, you're going to know that. That may look like, gobbledygook to you now, but you'll know it. Assuming you have the following declaration, int b is equal to 100. Write a line of code that will subtract 1 from b and store the result in b. Now, there's actually all sorts of ways you could do that. But you could do, well, y'all have taken other programming courses. Some of y'all have taken Python and stuff. How would we subtract 1 from b and store the result into b? B equals b minus 1. Would that do it? How many have had 1, 1, and 3, the Python programming course? Good number of y'all. That would work. Or you could do b minus equals 1. This language gives you something else other than minus equals, which is minus minus. You could do b minus minus or minus minus b. There's all sorts of choices, and any one of those would work. What will this print if the user enters a 10? That kind of stuff. So you can go in and you can peek at the quizzes and ease your anxiety over the way that they're set up. Any other questions? Yes, ma'am.
How many questions have you received of the quiz?
Pardon me?
How many questions are there?
Well, let's look at the one we were just looking at. They won't always be the same, but they're probably not going to be more, 10 to 20 questions would be my thought for each quiz. Okay, this one was a big one. It went out to 25 questions. Most of them aren't that long. Typically, the first run through a quiz might take you half an hour. It might take you a little bit longer, but then if you took it again, it'd only take you 10 minutes or whatever because it's preparing you for the exam. I really need to move my keys from my back pocket to my front. Stop. Okay. So why don't we write ourselves a program? What we're going to do is we're going to go to the magnifying glass, and we're going to type in VIS, like the word visual. VIS, however much you need to type to get Visual Studio 2017 to pop up. And Visual Studio is what's known as an IDE, which stands for Integrated Development Environment. What does that mean? Well, you may have taken a Java course or something where you use like TextPad to write a Java program and it saved it as a text file. And then maybe you ran some kind of macro or function key that would compile it, or maybe you just went to the command line and you ran it that way. Anyways, what this does is it gives you one application which has got a whole bunch of functionality built into it. the ability to create projects and to edit multiple files at the same time, you know, and to run them through what's known as the debugger. So what we ought to be able to do is go to File and click New, right? There we go. File, New Project. If you do New File rather than New Project, it's not going to work. You always have to create the project first and then add files to it. May seem counterintuitive. It's not like you have to create a new project before you can create a Word document, right? But in the C programming language, you do. You have to create the project first. And so it comes up with this little screen here. We're not developing C# applications, so I'm not going to choose anything in that one. Instead, I want Visual C++, and I want an empty project. Thought I saw it. There, if I click on Visual Studio C++, I see empty project. What does that mean? It means it creates a project, but it doesn't have any coding files in there yet. So we will create our own coding file. Well, let's give ourselves a project name. I'm going to just come down here and give myself a project name. Maybe I'll use my initials or whatever I'm going to do. I'm going to put in the letters and then numbers Jan 22. Or since this is the first lecture, maybe I'll just call it A, right? Because I number our days by letters. This is lecture A, the next one's going to be B, the next one's going to be C, and so on. All right, so A, empty project, and click OK. Let me know if you can't find that part, because I'm not going to go and blaze on for 15 more minutes if you don't have Visual Studio. Still get Visual Studio.
Mine was in the
Okay. All right, if you get an error message, I wonder if mine's going to do the same thing. Okay, at least it's being consistent. If you get this error, access to the path is denied. Then what you got to do is repeat the process, but we have to pick a different directory. And so we're going to use the browse button to do that. And I'm sorry that we've hit this situation. So I'm going to click browse, and it's going to want me to pick a directory to create my files. And so I think I'll just say in the documents folder, right? Something like that. I could make myself a new folder, something like that, put in C++ or something. I'm just going to have to remember this directory. Take note of where you're creating your project. On mine, it's going to be in the documents folder in something called C++. Now see, there already is a Visual Studio directory there, so I'm not sure why it wasn't working. Maybe I'll just select that one and go select folder. All right, now when I click OK, is it going to work? Yep, worked for me anyways. And it sits there and it churns and it churns and it churns and it churns. Finally, alright, so this is what's known as the Solution Explorer. And all the files you add are going to be added to folders under the Solution Explorer. And since we're starting off with simple programs, you'll probably only have one file in it. It's going to go into the source files folder there. What you're going to want to do, and if you don't get all this, if you can't get it installed, that's okay, because I think you're watching it. So like I said, you can just upload a note that says, you know, I attended and watched the lecture. All right, so I'm going to right-click on the source files, right-click and do Add New Item, because I need to add a programming file. And it comes up with the default name of source.cpp. That's pretty boring, but it works. I could put my initials there, or I could call it A, because, like I said, this is lecture A. You don't want to change the extension, though. It needs to be .cpp. And when you do that, it's going to come up to an empty file. And there's going to be some stuff that we add every single time. And I call that boilerplate, because we wind up adding it to the program every single time, and it gets kind of tedious. So what I generally wind up doing is saving what I'm about to type here into another file that I can just open and copy and paste out of every time. But so we're going to do #include, you know, the hash symbol. Hash include, INCLUDE, all lowercase letters. And then angle, which is shift comma, you know, the less than sign, IO stream. And then closing angle, right? Less than, IO stream, greater than. Now we're going to add another line of text. I think I'll put a blank line there, and then I'm going to say using, and it's okay, totally reasonable that you don't have an idea of anything of what this stuff means. You will know pretty soon. Using namespace, like name and then floating in outer space, space STD, like standard, STD, semicolon. In general, the rule of thumb is going to be we're going to put a semicolon at the end of each line. But there sure are a lot of exceptions. We didn't put a semicolon at the end of that line. You'll just learn when you need to use a semicolon and when you don't. In Python, you didn't have to end things in a semicolon. It made it easy. In this line of code, all programming statements will need to be separated by semicolons. But there are certain exceptions. All right. So now I'm going to type in void space main parentheses in parentheses. And like I said, don't get scared just because this stuff doesn't look comprehensible the first time you see it. Don't walk out of the class going, oh, programming's hard. Nah, you can do this stuff. It's just that I'm throwing you into the pool, right? You know, right away. Okay, so what is this going to do? It's going to display a message. So what I did is I used curly braces. If you've done Python programming, you'll remember that you had to tab stuff over, right? If you wrote a function or whatever, you had to tab. If you had an if statement, then everything inside it had to be tabbed. Well, this language doesn't care about tabs. Tabs are nice, but what it really uses are curly braces. And that's a shift of the key next to the P. So on your P key, go one to the right, hold shift, and then you'll get your curly brace. Now this particular language is a way of displaying output and getting input from the keyboard is very idiosyncratic. I haven't seen the like of it in any other programming language. You're not going to see the print keyword or the input keywords that you used in Python. It's going to look a little bit weird, but it works fine. So cout, which stands for console output, console being like a window, right? Less than, you know, shift of the comma, quote, what is your first name? Question mark. Space, end quote, semicolon. Now that is a semicolon and not a colon, so don't be hitting the shift key. And so now I need a variable to hold that. And there's a #include that I forgot to add. So you're going to need to go back up with me and add a line 2 or whatever line number it would be for you and add one more #include. I apologize for having skipped this. That's why I tend to make a boilerplate file that I can just copy and paste. This one's going to be #include less than string, like a piece of twine, and then greater than. So we're going to ask for the first name. We need a variable to contain that name. Now in Python you could just do this, right? Now don't type this because it's not going to work in this language. You could just do this, right? String is equal to input. Well, this language would have a problem with that. The biggest problem is that in this language you have to declare your variables before you could use them. We would have to create a name variable. And then the lesser problem is that there is no input function. So we have to create a variable called name. And when you create a variable, you declare it. You give it a data type. You say this variable is going to hold words, in which cases it's a string, or it's going to hold whole numbers, in which case it's an int, an integer. In Python, you could create a variable and then store anything you wanted into it. It didn't matter whether it was a number or a string or whatever. So string space name, or fname for first name. How about that? Once I have created it as being a string, I cannot store numbers in it. If I did this, and don't type it because it's wrong, fname is equal to 100, like that, it's not going to work. When I try to compile it and run it, this is a syntax error because I'm trying to store numeric data into a string. C, C++, Java are known as strictly typed languages, meaning that once you declare a variable, you can only store data of that same type in it. Whereas Python and JavaScript and a bunch of other languages are loosely typed. Once you declare a variable, you can redefine it as being any kind of data that you want. Okay, so I'm going to delete that as promised. Yes?
Is there a reason why mine doesn't turn green like yours?
Good question. Yeah, the color coding is important because once you know in general whether there's something going on or not.
Oh, there you go. Is that
Oh, well, good. I'm glad you figured it out.
okay?
All right. There's just like 3 more things we have to type, and then we'll be able to run it. So we've got their name. So what we're going to do is we're going to display a... No, we don't have their name yet. We've declared a variable, but we're not storing anything in the name. So type in CIN, which stands for console input, greater than fname. Now, not that we want to spend a lot of time talking about it right now, but this is what's known as stream IO, stream operators. And what this does is it takes this string and sends it to console output. But when the arrows are pointing the other way, it's reading from the keyboard console input and storing it in the name. If you get it wrong, it just won't compile. Like if I put greater than, rather than, less than on that top line, it wouldn't compile. It would immediately tell me that it was an error. And I'm liable to make that error while I'm typing this stuff in. Okay, so we have their variable, we have their name stored in a variable called fname. Now let's greet them. Cout, arrow, quote, good evening, comma, space, end quote, semicolon, and then cout, arrow, fname, semicolon, and then cout, arrow, quote, exclamation point, end quote, semicolon. I'm not sure I've been saying semicolon each time. Every single one of these lines is terminated by a semicolon. All right, and then there's one last line that I need to add, and I'll show you why. If I run this code as is, I'm getting a warning message, so I will address that in just a moment. But it runs it, and then it closes the window immediately as soon as we type it in, right? My first name is Bob. Whoops, gone. I didn't get to see it do anything else. So we're going to stick a pause command at the bottom. Now, it did yell at me. It gave me a warning. The warnings aren't serious. They won't stop the program from running, but we'd like for our code to compile without warning. I need to change that word void to int to int. So where it said void main, make that int main. And we're going to add 2 more lines of code down here to the bottom. Now this is a really cheesy way of getting the system to pause, waiting for you to repeat it. But it is an accepted way of doing it. But if you wind up doing this stuff on a Mac or on Linux, you're not going to add this line. You can leave it off. So system, parentheses, quote, pause, P-A-U-S-E, end quote, end parentheses, semicolon. That's the second to the last line. The last line is going to be return space 0. Return 0. So this is pretty much our boilerplate. What I'm going to wind up doing is copying all of this into a notepad file so that I can bring it back anytime that I need to. So I'm just going to hide. Well, I better test it though first, right? Why would I want to save it if it didn't work? So to run it, I can just head for the green arrow there that says local Windows debugger, or I could do debug start debugging. They do the same thing. What is my first name? Bob. Good evening, Bob. All right, I can see something that I wish it had done, which is that it displayed this end message, pressing the key to continue on the same line as the exclamation point. And I wish it hadn't done that. I wish it had gone to the next line. We need to put in an end of line marker there. So after the exclamation mark, I'm going to do arrow, arrow, E and D, L. This is the code that I just added to that statement. So that it's like hitting enter, right, on the typewriter keyboard. I want it to go to the next line before it displays the pause message. What's your first name? Bob. Good evening, Bob. Okay. I accidentally typed in a backslash, so it looks a little bit funny, but it worked. All right, so I'll wander around and I'll help y'all get this up and running if you don't have it up and running yet, but I want to do the screenshot part of it first and make the folder for uploading it first, because we are at the end of it and I want people who do have it working to be able to go ahead and submit it and be done for the day. And when I take a screenshot, basically I just want you to make a screenshot and paste it into a Word document or a Paint document and upload that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to run the program. Press the green arrow. What's your first name, Bob? All right, great, it's working. I'm going to kind of just drag this off to the side so that I can get both of those things in a screenshot at the same time. And there's 1,000,001 different ways of taking screenshots in Windows. I'm going to only talk about one because it's the one that I happen to have burned in my brain right now, which is hitting the print screen button. The print screen button is above the numeric keypad or above the home insert keys. You know, it's the next key over from F12. And these top three over here. I'm sure you know where it is. So press print screen. Just click it and release it. And then open an application like Paint or Word. I think I'll do Paint. So I'm going to click the magnifying glass, type in Paint, and then I'm going to paste. I always just use Control keys, so I'm going to hit Control V as in vehicle for pasting. But you can also click on clipboard paste or whatever. And if you put it in a Word document instead, that's totally fine. That's all you have to do. Now save it, and you have something you can upload. So File, Save As, doesn't matter what type it is. I'm going to choose PNG just because it's the top setting. And I'm going to call it Lecture A. .png. I guess I'll save it to my desktop because I haven't created a folder for all this stuff yet. Well, I see another folder. I can create a folder here. Anyways, so that's how you take a screenshot. And you create a document and you save that document, and that's what you can upload. Now, I'll never again ask you to make a screenshot for the stuff that we do in class. But do make screenshots for the stuff that you write at home. So now, are we ready to upload this program? Well, for those of y'all who got it working, great. If you didn't, that's okay. I'm going to help you. What's that? When I'm ready to upload the file, I need to be able to find it. What you can do is you can come over here and right-click on the file. I'm not seeing it there. Right-click on the solution name, which is the top line, and it will say Open Folder in File Explorer. And we're looking for the file that says b.cpp. Why did I call it B? Isn't today Lecture A? Whatever. Hopefully your folder's named A. I'm not sure where I came up with B. You won't see it here, so you have to open the folder of the same name, and then you'll see your CPP file. And if you're not seeing file extensions, that's a problem, and you're going to want to fix that. How do you see file extensions? Does everybody see .cpp and .vx and stuff like that, or is it hiding those? So it does have the, yeah, so if you double click on first project and go in there, no, not the solution file, if you open the folder, yeah. Yeah, just double click that, and you'll see your CPP file. Yeah, but it looks like all these computers are configured the same, so we don't. Windows by default hides file extensions. So that's the file that you're going to want to upload. So we'll go into D2l and we'll upload that file, and we'll also upload the screenshot that we made. But we need a folder in D2l in order to upload it. So there's a folder called Hello World. I'm going to click on that folder. What I did is I went to D2l, I clicked on Assignments. Click on Hello World. Click Add File. Click My Computer. I know most of y'all know how to do this. You can drag and drop from that folder that you just did. Right? You saw how I got to that. I went over to here to the Solution Explorer. I right-clicked and I did Open Folder in File Explorer. And then you don't see your CPP file here, so you go into the folder that has the same name. In this case, it's B because I didn't call it A or First Project. And then you'll find your CPP file, so which stands for C++. That's the one that I want to send. If I double-click it, it's not going to do anything good. I'm going to drag and drop it into Chrome, if I can. Or I'm just going to remember where it is, right? It's in Documents, Visual Studio 2017 B. So I could find it that way as well. You like using drag and drop? Great. Upload, Documents, Visual Studio B, and then when I finally find my CPP file, I'm good. Then I'm good to go. And I also want to find the screenshot that I took. And I just saved that to my desktop. So I'm going to click Add a File again, choose My Computer, Upload, and that one I saved on my desktop. I thought. Well, maybe I won't upload the screenshot. Oh, it's right there. It's right there. Okay, Lecture A.png. Now, this is like email. Just because we've added attachments doesn't mean that the other user is going to see them. We actually have to click the send button for them to get the email, right? So here we have to click the submit button to get our files to upload. And once you see this, file submission successful, then and only then do you know that it's up on the network and ready to be graded. Alrighty, so what's your homework going to be? It's going to be to install Visual Studio or another C++ environment and take a screenshot of it. And then you're just going to upload that screenshot into the homework folder. I'll create the homework folder and give you some more specific instructions about how to get a hold of C++. We'll talk more about that on Thursday, but if you're eager, you can go into... Oh, I'm not seeing it. I'll post the link. Oh, here it is, under Visual Studio. So under Content, scrolling down here, Visual Studio, there's a web page that gives information for how to access and install Visual Studio. So did anybody have any questions about this upload?
I didn't get to see that one.
Okay, get rid of semicolon. See that semicolon there? Let's delete that. That might be more. Showing all the fancy stuff on the side. I don't know why it's doing that, but there it is. Okay.
And
So
then
type it in. Something like that. All right, now you're ready to take a screenshot. So just press the print screen button, and then open up Word or Paint. Type in Word or Paint there in case. So it's going to take me good. All right. And that's the last thing we're going to do. So I've got all that done, and we are good. Work for you? No, All right, so run it and show me what it does. Oh, it says select start item. This means that we didn't make a project. Oh, it says project. Get rid of the semicolon before they get my arrow. See the semicolon there? Now maybe it'll build. Is that EL or is that Y? Making an L or a spell. Okay, it looks like it worked. Okay, so. This is very strange. For now, let's just accept that it's not working right, but we can still upload it. So go to the Solution Explorer, which I can see. So View, Solution Explorer. Find your file, so go right click on that and do folder and file explorer, and it will tell you where it is. So if you don't find it, put it. Sure. Yes, sir. Yeah. But when it said blank, oh, I said I'm show you that again. Project. Blank solution. Include. So I was package, but I wasn't sure. Should have done it. Go ahead and select that. Select which one. See, I would just select them all and accept the defaults. Unless we have a strong reason for not wanting to do that. Just the defaults. So I would go with those, yeah. Yeah. And